Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain and look at the secret sauce, the invisible engine that makes every great game tick. We're talking about core mechanics. Let's dive right in.
Okay, so think about your all-time favorite game, right now. What is it? Is it the jaw-dropping graphics, the story that had you on the edge of your seat? Yeah, that stuff's super important for sure, but what really gets its hooks in you? You know, that moment-to-moment feeling that just feels right? Well, the answer is usually something you can't even see.
Yep, that's where core mechanics come in. I love this analogy. Think of them as the invisible skeleton of a game. It's what gives the whole thing its shape, its structure, its strength. Literally everything else, the art, the story, the sound, it's all built right on top of this foundation.
So what exactly do we mean by skeleton? Well, imagine you could just peel away all the flashy stuff, strip out the graphics, mute the sound, forget the story for a second. What's left? What you've got is the raw system of interactions. That, right there, is the core mechanic. It's the pure essence of the game.
So to put it simply, game mechanics are basically the rules of the game. They define what you, the player, are allowed to do and what the game world does in response. And honestly, this deep level of interactivity is what makes games such a cool and unique art form, right?
But, just calling them rules feels a little dry, a little limiting. There's a much more powerful and, I think, intuitive way to think about mechanics, and that's to see them as verbs.
I mean, think about it. Verbs are action words, right? And what are mechanics if not the actions you can take in the game? Can you jump? Can you build? Can you talk to people? Can you fight? Every single one of those actions, that's a core mechanic.
And this is so cool. Entire genres are pretty much defined by their set of key verbs. In a classic RPG, what do? You move, you talk, you fight, you buy stuff. In a real-time strategy game, you're building, researching, ordering units around. And in a sim, maybe you're laying down track or digging tunnels. These verbs are the game. They define the whole experience.
Okay, so let's get a little more technical for a sec. Designers use two main types of rules to build all this stuff. You've got your operational rules, that's the simple how-to. Press the spacebar to jump. Easy. But then you have the constitutive rules. These are the deep underlying systems. It's the physics code that decides how high you jump, how fast you fall. You need both to make a game work. They're both totally crucial.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting. These mechanics, these verbs and rules, they don't just exist on their own in a vacuum. The real magic, the secret ingredient, is when a designer weaves them all together into rich, interactive systems. And this is a huge deal in modern game design. Instead of just creating a bunch of separate, one-off puzzles that have only one solution, the best designers are building simulations. They're creating worlds that run on reliable, consistent systems.
Okay, here's a classic example to show you what I mean. Imagine a locked door. If that door only opens with the blue key, that's just a simple hard-coded puzzle. But what if instead there's a pressure plate that opens the door when a certain weight is on it? Ah, now that's a system. Suddenly, you, the player, can get creative. You can find a heavy box, or pile up a bunch of smaller items, or maybe even just stand on it yourself. It opens up all these possibilities and makes the world feel so much more interactive and logical.
And this is where the real magic happens. When you start combining these simple, reliable systems, something truly incredible begins to happen. It's a phenomenon that designers call emergence. And for a lot of them, it's pretty much the holy grail of game design.
So what is emergent gameplay? It's when players take the simple rules and tools you've given them and start combining them in complex, creative, and often totally unexpected ways. Ways you, the designer, never even thought of. The perfect example is something like Zelda Breath of the Wild. The game has a rule for metal conducts electricity and a rule for lightning happens in thunderstorms. It never tells you to, but players figured out you can drop a metal sword near an enemy during a storm to call down a lightning strike on them. It's brilliant. That is emergence. And that's why it's considered the hallmark of a great game. Emergence is a sign that your game world is deep, that its systems are robust. It's what keeps people playing for hundreds of hours, always discovering new tricks and strategies. It makes the game feel alive.
So you might be asking, how do I design for that? Well, here's a kind of simple recipe for emergence. Number one, give the player more verbs, more basic actions, more tools that can interact with each other and the world. And number two, create open-ended goals. Don't just have one single solution to every problem. If you give players the freedom to experiment, they will absolutely surprise you.
Of course, all this freedom and all these interacting systems, well, they create a massive new challenge for the designer: balance. You can't just throw a bunch of mechanics into a pot and hope it tastes good, right? You have to carefully tune and control everything.
And the whole goal of balancing is pretty simple, actually. Make sure there is no single strategy that always wins. If there's one character, one weapon, one move that's always the best choice, what designers call a dominant strategy, then what's the point of having any other choices? Player decisions become meaningless, and the game gets stale fast.
One of the most powerful tools for creating balance is something called intransitive mechanics. Now, that sounds like a super complicated academic term, but I promise you, it's an idea you've known your whole life.
Yeah, it's just rock, paper, scissors. Think about it. Is rock the best move? Well, not if your opponent plays paper. Is scissors the best? Not against rock. There's no single best option. Your choice always depends on what you think the other person is going to do. That's an intransitive relationship, and that dynamic forces you to adapt, making the game endlessly interesting.
All right, so we've got our systems, we understand how to balance them. What's the last piece of the puzzle? Well, it's the long, sometimes grueling, but absolutely critical process of tuning. This is where a good game design on paper becomes a great game in your hands.
Because here's the thing, no game is born perfect. You can't just write a perfect design document and be done. A great game is forged in the fires of iteration and playtesting. It's all about making tiny adjustments, tweaking the numbers, and just massaging the systems over and over until it all feels just right.
So that means a designer doesn't just pull a number out of thin air and say, this sword does 10 damage. That number is discovered. It's found through countless hours of testing. Is 10 too much? Is it not enough? Does it make other weapons useless? You can only answer those questions by playing, feeling it out, and tuning those variables again and again.
And that constant adjustment is what creates the game's feel. You ever wonder why jumping in Super Mario feels so perfect and responsive? While in some other game it might feel floaty or stiff? It's not magic, it's tuning. It's all those tiny invisible numbers for gravity, acceleration, and timing, all dialed in perfectly to make the controls feel like a natural extension of your own body.
So look, the real takeaway here isn't just understanding why other games are great. It's about giving you the tools to think about how to make your ideas great. It all comes back to that invisible skeleton. So the question I want to leave you with is this: what simple rules, what handful of verbs could be the foundation for your game? What could you combine to create that emergent magic? That's the real challenge and the real fun of game design. Thanks so much for watching.